Namaste, Adab, good afternoon. I am Yogendra Deva, your today's host for this open house. Don't be surprised if you don't see our regular hostess Mugdha for today's program. Actually, she has very generously let me host the program today. We are into the 19th open house. We can say that our open house in the last of its teens, and it will be in its 20s from next month onwards. We love hosting these open houses every second Saturday of the month, strictly 1 hour program. And we also hope that you also love to attend these programs. We come up with some very relevant topics for the open houses. And today's topic is also very interesting. It is the geological and geotechnical risk management in tunnel construction. Uh, and for steering this program, we have the literati of the hydropower industry in the country and in neighboring countries also. So we have Dr. Gopal Dhawan as the initiator of the program. He is, I need not introduce that way. He is an engineering geologist par excellence and formerly executive director NHPC and of course CMD MECL. Then we have Mr. Sunil Jain with us. He is the additional general manager, Rail Vikas Nigam Limited (RVNL), and is currently involved with the development of the Rishikesh Karnaprayag rail link. And we are lucky to have him because his contribution today will be, I think, on TBM board tunnels. We have with us A.K. Mishra ji, the driving force behind hydropower in Bhutan, who is the MD, Mangde Chu, and we look forward to hearing what is going on in Bhutan, specifically to Mangde Chu there. And of course, last but not the least, our stalwart hydropower engineer par excellence, R.N. Mishra ji, and who has been the driving force behind UJVN as CMD, and he's a very busy person doing number of things these days. And again, without you all, this program will be nothing. So I think your contributions after the initiation and views of our experts, your views, your queries, your contributions will make today's open house a grand success. So I have taken a lot of time, and now I request Dr. Gopal Dhawan to please go ahead with his initiation of the program. Gopal Dhawan, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devasa, for our generous introduction and giving outlines of the program. Good afternoon, everybody, particularly my co-panelists, Mr. Jain, Mr. A.K. Mishra, and Mr. R.N. Mishra. Well, I straight away go to today's topic, which is geological and geotechnical risk management of hydro tunnels. Well, you see why we are discussing this? Because we have seen in most of tunnels, particularly hydro tunnels, we have got very poor progress. By drain blast methods, our progress is not more than 50 to 55 meters per month per phase. We had deployed TBMs at a lot of projects, but that has also not helped in completing the tunneling projects on time. There are a few success stories like Kishanganga and Parvati 2 inclined pressure shaft tunnel. But barring that, we had problems with TBM. For example, in Dulhasti, in Parvati 2, at Tapovan Vishnughat, TBM was stuck there for a long time. Then we also experienced that the conventional investigations provide us a very limited understanding of the ground, and exploring geology along the tunnel route is a big challenge. Why it's a big challenge, I'll come to. So we have two ways to improve. first improve investigations, blend the modern investigating techniques with the conventional ones, particularly geological mapping, and to adopt a pragmatic approach for risk assessment, risk sharing, and risk management. Having said that, I would say that we have a lot of experience. Although it looks like a paradox that we have experience of making tunnels in all sectors of Himalayas from northwest to northeast. We had seen all types of geologies through these tunnels, from Shivaliks to Lesser Himalayas to Greater Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau. We have seen everything, and these red dots on the plan give you the location of various tunneling projects in Himalayas. The railway projects and highway projects are not included. So after having done hundreds of kilometers of tunneling, why we say that we are not satisfied with our own progress? The reason is during construction of these projects, we had experienced several types of problems. And some of the main problems which we normally encounter are fault zones, shear zones, crushed or fractured rock masses, with or without high seepage for substantial length of tunnels. Low cover zones. I had worked at 2 projects where we received very difficult situations because of that. Devi Ghat in Nepal, Loktak in Manipur, and in Seva project. Mr. Mishra is here. He was the GM there. Due to low cover reaches, we had our projects really suffering. Then squeezing ground conditions. We had it at Loktak, high discharge under high pressure with silt was there in Parvati 2. The project was closed for about 5 long years. That ingress of hot waters in Nakpa Jhakri, rock busting conditions, partially we received at, we have seen in Parvati 2, ingress of harmful gases. Once again, methane was there in Loktak, and there were a couple of methane blasts, and a lot of people, maybe 100 people lost their life. This was somewhere in the middle of 70s. And the last issue, which perhaps we don't appreciate, but we have this problem everywhere, that areas where large variation in rock classes or rock types as compared to BOQ. This is also a kind of, you can say, risk, and very major risk which affects the cost and time both for completion of a tunnel. So these problems which we had experienced in all these tunnels which we had constructed in Himalayas, these are nothing but major geological risks. And why? This picture really gives you much more than 1,000 words. The reason is inaccessibility, complexity in geology, paucity of outcrop, lack of deep investigative techniques in Himalayas, once again because of accessibility. This is a picture of a project named Chamkarchu in Bhutan, and the red line is the hypothetical line which depicts the proposed HRT. So now you can imagine that if you investigate a tunnel in this area, how much geology you can understand with help of only geological mapping or by making a geological project. So we have to look for the answer that this handicap in understanding geology is removed with help of other complementary techniques. And many a times for a project like Chamkarchu, we try to develop a geological model. Nowadays, the term model is a buzzword. So, but this is a geological section, you can say, the 2-dimensional model. So, yeah, you may take this picture as a hypothetical picture, where based on geological mapping, what we can achieve, first of all, let me say that what we can achieve and then what we cannot achieve. We now know what are the types of geological formations through which our tunnel will go. And this can be done with lot of accuracy if the person who has mapped the area has done a good work. And he has tried to pick up all kinds of outcrops, although in Himalayas there are situations where we do not get out more than 2% of outcrops in the area. And then we also know that what are the probable contact zones. We also know some idea about the rock class percentages. But to me, this is a kind of hypothesis which we have to prove or disprove through the investigative techniques. I'm not going to into the details of those techniques, but I will simply draw your attention that after doing mapping, we can divide the tunnel into three types of areas. One, where geology is reasonably well known. And in my opinion, if the geological mapping is good, you can go up to 1/3 of the tunnel would be well known. Then we have areas where geology is known, but the problems, the location of problems is unknown. And the third sector of the tunnel would be where nothing is known. We will be in a dark zone, and we will know some broad geology, outlines of geology, formations of geology, what type of rock types will be there, but where I mean, neither the locations of problem would be known, nor the extent of geological formations can be understood with clarity. So now there's a need for strategy of the risk reduction. If the investigations are done properly, if we can focus on the geological studies for identifying major risks, we should highlight the terrain limitations which have influenced our investigations. We have used geophysics and exploratory drilling with some judiciousness. And if we have identified the geological and hydrological risks before construction, and we have made suitable provisions in contract, I am sure we will do a better job for identification of risks, their assessment, and then we can draw a management plan. So nowadays, therefore, previously we were submitting a document which was known as DPR, but now it is insisted upon that there should be a one volume which is recording the only factual report of geotechnical data, which is GFR, so that anybody can interpret your data. He is not guided or misguided by your own interpretation. And interpretations are compiled in the second volume, which is GIR, and then GBR, Geotechnical Baseline Report. In my opinion, this is the time, this is the report in which all geological and geotechnical risks should be spelled out. But still there will be certain limitations. We will not know exact locations. We will not know frequency at which a problem occurs. And then we will not know extent and their magnitude in all cases. But in some cases we will. And then if you have good set of geological data for each and every risk, you can prepare a risk matrix depending upon likelihood of the risk and consequences of that risk into these four colors: low, medium, high, and extreme. And finally, I would say record enough geological and geotechnical studies for GBR, identify each adverse geological occurrences, make plan for every adverse geological situation, include possible solution in the contract for tackling each risk, and maintain a risk register. I leave it here. Here onwards, Mr. Sumit Chand will take over, and he will give you much better idea about the risk register in his talk. Thank you very much, Deva. Back to you.
Thank you, Dhawan Saab. Thank you very much. It was a crispiest presentation we have ever had from you, and very informative too. And
Thank
now let us welcome Mr. Jain. Jain sir, please.
Okay, thank you, DDAG, and I feel privileged to be present between you and to present a small aspect on the case study of package 4 in Rishikesh Karnaprayag project. So here we are just focusing on the geological and geotechnical risk management, which we had adopted in our project. And the contents of the presentation will include, I'll just cover a brief layout, what package 4 is, so that we can get a better understanding. Then I will be covering the tender risk register, which we have followed in our contract. And in that risk register, we are only going to cover the geological and geotechnical aspects. Then I'm also going to cover a few contract provisions which have been kept in the contract for further reducing the risk from the TPM operation point of view, and to promote the transparency of work. So the basics of the subject have already been discussed very well by Dr. Dhawan, and I will take it further from there to cover the risk register of our TPM project. So this is a brief layout. On your right, you can see a map of India and Uttarakhand, and the alignment of the project in green. And you can see various stations. I feel they are visible. Then this is the package 4 location, which has been zoomed. And this is the alignment of the railway project. So I'll just go and switch on the marker. Just. So this is the Devprayag. If you can see the pointer, this is the Devprayag junction, where confluence of Bhagirathi and Alaknanda rivers is happening. And on your towards the right, it goes to the Tiri Dam, and towards this Alaknanda, it goes all the way up to Badrinath. And this is where we are crossing this terrain in the Devprayag. So we are, this is the Pauri district, and this is the alignment of the project. And this is the portion marked in blue, which we are going to excavate through a TBM. You can see the length is 10.4 kilometers. It is a twin tube project. So we have 2 TBMs, and technical details like 9.1 meter is the excavation dia of each TBM. And we have a TBM breakthrough point midway inside the tunnel. So the remaining part is drill and blast. So TBM is going to launch from this location after doing a drill and blast of roughly 586 meters. And then we are going to do TBM tunneling all the way up to this breakthrough point. And from the other side, we are going to drill and blast for 3.5 kilometers. We also have a shaft somewhere in between here, which I will discuss. Now, briefly coming to certain aspects which are involved with the pre-construction, I would say pre-tender. This was the alignment selection for this particular length of the project. And initially, you can see in the upper part of the presentation, this was the original alignment which we had for the package 4. And this was an underground station of approximately 1 kilometer long by the span is ranging around 25 meters wide. And so this was the kind of alignment, and this was chosen like that because this area is entirely composed of phyllites of varying degrees of metamorphism. And we were thinking that if we go deep inside where the overburden is huge, so then we can face a very heavy squeezing condition there. And that is why in the yellow you can also see the adits which were located before the design stage. And then when we went to the field and did some geotech investigations, we found that this area is absolutely unfit for making the tunnel. It was primarily because the entire left bank of Alaknanda River is landslide prone area, right from I would say if you know the locations here. So right from Maletha to Devprayag, the entire left bank of Alaknanda River is prone to landslides. And when we were doing the GTA investigations along this alignment, we actually faced many landslides in the year 2016 and 17. So this further confirmed our initial observations, and also the UCS of the rock mass was intact rock was very less. It was in the range of 15 MPa, 20 MPa, and it was highly foliated. So then we decided to shift this alignment inside where the overburden is huge. But then we also planned more investigations to check whether this shifted alignment is possible. At the same time, because of poor geology, the station was shifted outside. So you can see the revised shifted location of the station. And you can also see the L section of the topography. Here the overburden is less. But in the bottom, in the same location, in this red window, this overburden increased because we shifted the alignment inside from the valley. And pardon me, this text box was supposed to come but did not come due to animation issue. So there was no road network on the left bank of the river. That was also one of the concern, that we could not make these edits. And the revised alignment was also 500 meters shorter. And the underground substation was to be shifted because of poor rock results during GTI. So additional investigations were done along the revised alignment. And this is the revised alignment in which this is the TBM section. We have a shaft, and this was Chandpur formation. It was entirely composed of phyllites, and the overburden is the highest overburden is marked on your screen. So we were starting from 544 meters, and we were encountering a maximum overburden of 854 meters, and the minimum was in the range of 137, 70, and these numbers. These were the initial investigations which we had done. The yellow arrows, you can see they are spaced quite apart, especially in this zone, because there was absolutely no way to reach this area along the earlier alignment. And then when we shifted the alignment, we did additional 2 boreholes and interpreted these boreholes, or rather extrapolated the data of these boreholes to the new alignment. So then the thing that we were apprehensive that the rock will not be that strong and we may encounter higher squeezing because of increased overburden. That was not correct. We got a good rock formation in the entire length of this higher overburden area, and the UCS was coming in the range of 45 MPa, 50 MPa. I would not put a single figure because there is a distribution usually when we speak of geotechnical test results. So the most frequent UCS was around 45 MPa in this area. And that is when we took a decision to revise the alignment and go inside with a higher overburden. Few more strategies to deal risk for the TBM operation were to have a high point at the TBM breakthrough. So this was TBM breakthrough area. So we had a high point in the tunnel alignment, and any water ingress, although it is a phyllite, the joints are watertight. We expect nothing to bother us really, but still from operational reason and construction issues, we put a high point at the TBM breakthrough, and all water will be coming out gravity flow. So this will help us in reducing the risk of water ingress, whatever it is. And on the other side, drill blast also, it is a naturally gravity flow driven drainage. Now coming to the tender risk register, we are having this distribution. We are firstly classifying the likelihood of occurrence with this percentage distribution. Then we are discussing the magnitude of consequence with this marking. And initial risk is high, medium, low, and the residual risk is high, medium, low. Each and every project may have their own strategy to quantify and identify the occurrence parameters, and then the residual risk and the magnitude. So it is a very project specific description or specification, I would say. It is nothing to do with a standard guideline, or yes, there are guidelines internationally available, but we have followed our own set of definitions which were specific to our project. And this was the column or the table headings of the risk register. So we were firstly showing the event. Event was described. Then the impact or consequences, we were discussing the likelihood and the potential impact if it occurred, and the magnitude of consequence if it occurred. Then we are discussing about the initial risk, that if the occurrence of that event is there, then what is the risk to the project? What are the mitigation measures which are required to be taken? Now, these measures are both from the employer side and the contractor side. It is not only for the contractor. So here we made a distinction that we have to jointly address the risk mitigation measures. And then after addressing the risk mitigation measures, then in our assessment, what will be the residual risk? And then that risk has to be allocated to either the employer or the contractor. So many risks, in many cases, we have taken that allocation on our heads as employer, because the ground risk cannot be left to the contractor. And in many cases, even in case of geology, contractor is responsible for certain issues. So we'll discuss this more on this in the next slide. And then in the last column, to make it contractually applicable, because in the contract there is a priority of documents. So we are then mentioning the clauses of general condition of contract, or COPA if you say, or particular condition of contract, so that we have a order of priority of these risk management. So this is the very first event which was there in the risk register. It is variation in distribution of support sections. So we are following both drill and blast and TBM. In case of NATM, we are following ONORM, and in case of ONORM, there are various support section types. So we have given a distribution of the support section types along the length of the tunnel, and this is given in the GBR. Now that distribution may vary, because in ONORM usually it is depending on a lot of things, not only the ground, but also the way the contractor is installing supports, or the way the grouting is done, and many factors are affecting it. So we are mentioning this, that if there is a variation, then it has to be addressed. And how it has to be addressed? The mitigation measures are like that: the contractor shall commit the progress rate. So supposing there is a B1, B2 or B3 distribution of support section, and we have already asked the contractor to commit the progress rates in the contract. If B1 occurs, then how much progress rate he's going to give us? If B2 is there, then what is the advance rate? So these commitments we are already collecting during the contract when the bid is being submitted. And this is taken against a standard or rather a detailed design GFC. So another important thing is that the construction drawings, which are normally issued after the award of contract to the contractor, this should be very well detailed and included in the tender stage itself, when we are awarding the tender, when we are inviting the tender, so that contractor actually knows what he's going to install, how he's going to manage the work, he's going to sequence his operations. And if there is a big change once he gets the award, and then there are all sort of litigations you can imagine. So this is one of the major risks that we saw, and we shared all the drawings in the contract to have these commitment on the progress rate. And now the time is recalculated according to the support section type. So if the section changes, we are ready to change the time for completion of the project. Now in this, if you see the residual risk allocation, the employer takes the onus to provide the required time extension if adverse classes of rock is encountered. And payment is made as per the type of support section provided. So whatever support section is needed, payment is governed by that. But the time extension will be governed by the rock support section actually installed. And the contractor is at the same time responsible for probe boring and arrange the type of support required to be provided to avoid any delays. So contractor has been held responsible to be prepared for a change in support section, as well as he's also made responsible to probe every time. And then you can see the provisions of the contract. Coming on the next is squeezing in ground or ground pressure to the shield. So this is more or less related to both TBM and well as drill and blast. So in this, the potential impact will be that we have to increase the thrust and torque power requirements of the TBM. We may have to enlarge the excavated tunnel dimension, and both these risks we have impacts we have identified. And in the mitigation measure, we are saying that there will be a continuous monitoring of the thrust and torque of the TBM, the records of probe drilling and geophysical test, monitoring of deformations in NATM tunneling, sharing data and timely notification of any alarming observation to the engineer. So contractor is made responsible to do all this and inform the engineer timely. At the same time, shimming of periphery cutters, installation of additional gauge cutters, offsetting of cutter head for enlargement of tunnel excavation. So these measures are only concerned with TBM, that contractor has to implement these measures in his machine. Contractor is also required to carry out the pre-excavation grouting. He is also required to install lining stress controllers in NATM tunneling, which can mitigate this risk. Predetermination and mutual agreement of TBM standstill. Now, this is a very important mitigation measure to control this risk, because usually there is no agreement between contractor and employer as to, like, when the TBM tunneling is happening, so which are the areas where we can stop for maintenance. If the TBM is getting stopped in a very weak zone and contractor is taking all the time for maintenance, it is not a luxury that we have these days, and it most likely the TBM will get entrapped. So it is important that we have a mutual agreement on the TBM standstill areas. And definitely the availability of higher thrust forces, because when the excavated tunnel periphery squeezes the TBM, so then there has to be additional reserve thrust force to push against the segments or the gripper shoes to advance out of that squeezing. And in this, we have again identified the risk allocation. And we are saying that employer will provide a time extension, and employer will also bear the remedial cost if the event is unforeseeable and has happened even after adopting adequate preventive precautions stipulated in the agreement. So if we have made it very clear that if the event is unforeseeable, if the event was unforeseeable and it has happened in spite of doing all the preventive precautions by the contractor, in spite of attending all the instructions of the engineer, even then if it has happened, then employer will bear the time extension and the remedial cost. And however, the contractor is still responsible to bear the remedial cost for loss or damage for which the contractor is responsible. So there are certain things for which the contractor is also responsible for ensuring the certain part of damage, like insurance of TBM, insurance of the permanent works. So ultimately, yes, we are taking the onus, but it has to be ensured by the contractor. So we are saying that employer will provide a temporary cash flow before settlement of claims to ensure unhindered progress of work. However, it will be the responsibility of the contractor to submit proper and timely claims to the insurance company and follow up the recovery of the cost. So in a way, we are telling the contractor that even if this happens in spite of all the measures, even then he has to insure it from the company, and employer will be helping him in terms of cash flow. Failure to recover the cost shall be employer shall be entitled to recover the cost. So if the contractor is failing to recover that insurance cost from the insurer, then employer will recover the cost which he has paid to the contractor. Similarly, in other event, we have identified the occurrence of sudden loose fall. Pardon?
Sorry, sir.
Okay. So I'll continue. I'll just speed it up. I'll not repeat the residual risk allocation now for the future events, because this is same for all the future upcoming events. The another event is recognized as occurrence of sudden loose fall, chimney formation, flowing ground, collapse at face, sudden water inrush. So we are simply saying that it can be mitigated by probe drilling, geophysical test, and interpretation of data, and sharing the record with the engineer, and adoption of ground strengthening measures before excavation as directed by the engineer. In next event, there is the emission of harmful and combustible gases. So these can lead to non-working conditions and damage due to explosion or a delay in the tunneling process. So we have mitigated it by saying that there should be a provision to detect these systems on the TBM, and there should be a provision to effectively ventilate and exhaust all the gases. And we have to keep arrangement of oxygen cylinders and other measures in case of emergency. The last but not the least, we have a ground collapse at the tunnel shield. This has happened, I think, in Tapovan and some of the projects. So we are saying that in such a case, the facility of gap grout system using the fluid gap grout by a close contact between lining and ground by fully filling the gap. So there should be a gap grout system installed on the TBM so that we are able to close the gap before the loosening happens. The last event is the sinking tendency of the second last event is the sinking tendency of the TBM in weak soils. And here we are saying that it can be mitigated by deployment of an experienced TBM operator and who is doing supervision of the data, advanced probing data and alignment control, individual control of thrusters by increasing the forces in the invert, bringing up the machine to the correct position, improving of the guiding mechanisms, and ground improvements in the invert area by injection of grouts. Lastly is the overstressed TBM segment lining due to high groundwater pressure. So this can be mitigated by carrying out a probe drilling and geophysical test and interpreting the data, installation of check valves at the bottom of the lining, arrangement of draining out of infiltered water, and obviously pre-excavation grouting to control the water pressure. So this is just covering briefly on the geological and geotechnical aspects. In our contract, we have many other categories like TBM design manufacturing stages, climatic, health, safety, and seismological risk. And then we have availability of raw material, which we have seen as a risk. The working in dumping grounds, transportation logistics, transport of the segments, transporting of the TBM to the site. Then TBM operation and TBM maintenance is also we have identified as a risk, and we have categorized many events in that. And then of course, segment casting and installation is a very big area where we have carried out certain risk mitigation measures. So before going further, I'll just cover one more thing of regarding the TBM machine. Few contract provisions we have kept, and this has been kept after a lot of study and review of what has been going on not only in India, around the world. And after this, I'll close my presentation. But before closing, I'll just give a brief glimpse of what we have done in the contract. All boreholes have been investigated, and in situ and lab tests have been shared as GDR, which was covered by Dr. Dhawan. Baseline conditions for bidding were shared as GBR. The contractor has been told that he is free to carry out any additional investigation on a payment basis if he feels so. And this has been given in writing to the contractor, so that tomorrow we don't, because we are doing this as a partner to the contractor. So tomorrow there should not be any hesitation in like doing this investigation. We should not leave this stone unturned. Then the choice of TBM we have left to the contractor. We have only mentioned that it will be a shielded TBM because it is a safety requirement of tunneling standards. And then we have said that there will be a pneumatic 4 probing facility in the TBM. We have mentioned the frequency of 4 probing in the contract. We have also mentioned the geophysical probing requirement in the contract. And we have also mentioned the rotary core drilling in the contract of limited 1 meter, 2 meter. Then we have also mentioned the convergence monitoring system between the shield and the rock. Concentric shields have been specified to cater to squeezing condition, and the limit of conicity in the shield has been mentioned as 10 mm per meter. So each shield, there is a front shield, middle shield, and tail shield. So there is a total length of the shield. So along this total length, the conicity will be 10 mm per meter. So the shield will actually diametrically reduce when it goes from the front shield to the tail shield. And this is required because the rock is actually squeezing towards the shield. So there should be inbuilt margins into the shield to not get trapped. Then there will be a segment ring convergence monitoring through which we will be monitoring the convergence of the installed segments. And there will be capabilities for cutting dia enlargement. So we have mentioned 250 mm in the crown to tackle the squeezing ground conditions. Actually, during design stage, we anticipated maximum squeezing of 170 mm. We have gone slightly more than that as a mechanism in the TBM. And lastly, the probing and grouting capabilities through 15 inclined and 6 horizontal drill ports. Measure while drilling capability on the drill motors for probing. This is all inside the TBM. We have also asked for 76 dia 4 polling capability. Then there is a disc cutter load monitoring system. There is a provision or a requirement to install 10 Hardox abrasion resistant plate on the cutter head, because when you have abrasive rock, it wears out and eats the plates. It wear out the cutters as well as the front shield. Then TBM stuck up and contingency plans have been identified as a part of the contract. So we have very laid out very clearly that in spite of everything, if anything happens to the TBM, there is a stuck up. Then the contingency plans have also been elaborated, and the contractor is free to select the type of plan which is agreed by employer and the engineer. And then there is a continuous gas monitoring system installed in the TBM. So in spite of, I would just conclude by saying that in spite of all the risk mitigation measures, we should always be ready with the latest state of the art when we are going for mega projects like this, where we can install provisions on the TBM which can help us to further reduce what is there as a residual risk to the project execution. So thank you very much. I took more time. I'll apologize to the committee, but I wanted to take this much time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I think it was a very good presentation, no doubt. And now we move on to A.K. Mishra ji to hear something about Magdechu risk management.
Sir, you are muted. Please unmute.
Sumit, ये screen.
Mishra ji, आप muted है Mishra ji आप.
Yeah. Now I'm audible.
Now you are audible. Yes.
Yeah. So let me first give my personal congratulations to Dhawan Saab, who's organizing such good professional programs for so long, and also to Sumit Jain, who has presented very well about tunneling through TBM. See, Dhawan Saab told me to present something what I have experienced in Magdechu. Magdechu project is basically a success story with respect to hydro projects. We did this project excluding transmission component at about 6 crores per megawatt. If you compare the contemporary projects of similar size in India, the cost is touching between 9 to 10 crores per megawatt. Why it has happened? The primary reason is that we could succeed in controlling the time. Wherever we could control the time on all the components, it is concrete dam, then tunnel, then underground powerhouse, especially in the tunnel, which is 13.5 kilometer long, where we were moving with 5 adits, so 10 phases. And in this, we had a lot of issues pertaining to the geology and also the geotechnical. Now I would like to share with you that what is important in the tunneling is that one should, Dhawan Saab will appreciate this, that most of our tunnels are shallow tunnels. They, if you look from the ground side, ground top to the top of the tunnel underground, is varying between 500 to 600 meter overburden. And rarely, whenever it is unavoidable, you are passing through a very deep overburden, maybe a kilometer or more than a kilometer, where we have all experienced rock busting in those reaches. We also had in Magdechu some reach where we had a rock busting. But the point is that now we should be very careful and planning deep-seated tunnels, where the overburden is bound to be more. Suppose it is more than a kilometer or maybe 1,500 meters, 1.5 kilometers. Then what is the strategy? So I request to this forum that let us concentrate on the deep tunnels. My point is that a time is now coming up when we have to have deep excavations. We have to move our tunnels quite deep inside because of various reasons. So that is the area which is basically untouched, or not much work has been done. So I would like to attract the all fellow colleagues that now we should search seriously on the deep tunnels. Apart from deep tunnels, I am also having a point to make that the Magnitude tunnel, the last phase where the search shaft is located, we are subjected to about roughly 10 kg per centimeter square hydraulic pressure inside. And I have experienced that this is a very high pressure for a concrete line tunnel. So now we have to also fix up that a hydraulic tunnel of say 6 meter finish size should be subjected to, at the best, how much pressure? Is it 10? Is it more than 10 or less? To my mind, 10 kg per centimeter square is a very high pressure, and tunnel handling at that pressure is just a finger crossed. You know, the tunnel is running at a pressure of 5-6 kg all along. Till search shaft is there, then it is okay, no danger. But some portion of the tunnel, if it is subjected to that hydraulic gradient where the pressure is, internal pressure is more than 10 kg or roughly 10 kg, the things are difficult, because then the lining has to be modified, thickness has to be modified, concrete quality is to be modified. These are the very important aspects which usually are not very seriously, looked into when we are doing the work, when we are executing the work. This time when I was filling the water in the tunnel, and when the tunnel was fully filled up, I could experience the pressure at the end, how much it was, the pressure gauge was showing. So this is the point where we should pay some attention while designing the tunnel. The tunnel should have a pressure, to my mind, should not be more than 7 to 8 kgs per centimeter square. Now, what Sumit Jain has said, perfectly okay. But from the design point of view, we have still not developed how to handle large deformations. If you go to the underground openings, or maybe because he will be handling the TBM tunnels, maybe stations, underground stations where the span will be more. You will have the problems with the large underground deformations. Classical theories are not able to give you a full picture that how these large deformations will happen, up to what extent they can go, whether you can really handle them properly or not, what is the strategy. These are the important areas where we should now concentrate. How to handle the large deformations, how to classically analyze them. No, we don't have very good approach till date for the large deformations handling. I would request Sumit to especially work on in this area. Now, in the presentation, he has shown that the residual risk he has divided between the employer and the contractor, and the high risk he is keeping with the employer. Am I correct, Sumit?
Yes.
So what I mean to say, that if you look the data of last 10 years, you will appreciate that the what cost you are awarding the work and what cost you are finishing the work. If you scan the data in India, at least all tunnelings, hydraulic tunnels, you will find the cost estimate has gone 100% more, or sometimes 150%, sometimes even 200%. That speaks that whatever we planned in the beginning, theoretically, did not work very well. So in your case also, you have said, I was reading in your slide, that if the contractor does not recover the cost in a reasonable time, you will recover the cost from the contractor.
Yes.
I would like to know from where this money will come and how this money will be recovered during the operational contract. Are you going to have some surplus BG performance bank guarantees right at the time when you are awarding, or from where this extra money will be coming to you if the contractor is not able to recover the money? Most of the cases I have seen, the money is not able, the employers are not able to recover the money. There is a deficit. So how you're going to solve this, and then how you're going to fix up this variable into the premiums and into the insurance policies. So I just would like to draw your attention that please look into this, because I have seen the behavior of the insurance policies or insurance companies, especially for hydro projects. They are very scary. It's very difficult to get the insurance for the tunnel for good companies. And you are putting, as I see, the document is good, but most of the things you are expecting the insurances to pay. I doubt that the insurance payments will be easier to get, and it is easier to, it will be very difficult for the employer and also the contractor to prove before the insurance company that whatever you have written in the contract is also happened. Documentation is very important. And in such situations, if you don't prove it, the insurance company will not pay you. So what I'm cautioning you is, though the document intent is good, but the implementation part, the next step, that is equally difficult. See, we are working in a country where we have a lot of limitations, and that limitation is not only the commercial limitations, intellectual limitations are also there. The way you think, your boss may not think in the same way. You may be little large-hearted or maybe better thinker into the whole team, but it is not necessary that down the line, up the line, the same mindset goes. So once it is not there, who is going to accept your mind? Who is going to accept your decision? You are not the final authority. There's somebody above you. So my suggestion is that create a flexibility in such a manner that you don't make an error right at the drafting stage of the contract, because then it cannot be corrected. It will convert into a claim. Then the arbitration and all those things. No, closing of contract is a big issue. So my only request is that all these tunneling engineers who are working so nicely, doing very work hard, because the document preparation that requires a lot of concentration of thinking ability and everything together. In your case, you have done wonderful job, but what I'm seeing with respect to Indian perspective, that these are the problems which you are going to face. Contractors will remain the Indian contractors. They have limited resources, and their technological level within the company is very limited. Until you step in, see, either you start, once you have started writing good technical specifications, then an item rate contract says, then you should govern the contractor. He should work on your advice. You should have that much capability. That is the intent of the item rate. Had it been an EPC contractor, it is his responsibility. Then your role goes down. But if it is an item rate contract, you are supposed to be more intelligent, more knowledgeable than contractor. And you guide the contractor, because he is following what you have narrated into the contract. If you make mistake there, he is paying for it. So my suggestion is, writing good document is okay, but then always keep some margin or some cushion where you can absorb the eventuality. If you don't absorb the eventuality, the contract will go haywire. Very tight contract are very difficult to operate. Engineer in charge will raise the hands. I cannot do it. The important thing which I feel is, which if you can do it in your tunnel, this TBM, or maybe the drilling and blasting method, especially in DBM, if you very meticulously implement pre-grouting before blasting, if you can grout the area very well, if you can develop a technology which can bring you good grouting results. I tell you a very small example. In my project, the shell shaft, we have gone 152 meter deep. It's 14 meter dia, deep shell shaft. Everybody said at that point of time, this shaft cannot be done. But I tell you, we did the grouting so well that the IIT Delhi's the core result says the shear parameters improved by 40%. Virtual soil converted into a mid-class or mid-strength rock. That is the result. And we could do a shaft of that size in a very poor rock. So what I request to you that let us put a more thrust in inducting pre-grouting technologies before blasting. If you can do that, it's wonderful. Number one. Number two, spend more time on the boomer operator who is going to operate the boom. Bring a best man into the picture, and he should evolve. He should collect the data while drilling. We have no data record of the drilling. And we could have predicted certain things while drilling rate itself. The recording is not done. This facility is available. The poor operator does not know how to log it. That is the issue. So my suggestion to you is, because you are going to handle a lot of things in that area which is quite fragile, if you can induct these things, I'm not telling very big thing. There are things which are within the range, and improve your contracts, then I am sure you have fair chances of completing the work at a reasonable price. Because today also, whatever pricing you will be doing, it is an estimated price. And you want on your estimate somebody to quote. You have a bandwidth that if somebody goes beyond that, above that price, I will reject. You know, your price becomes a benchmark price. And if your price is wrong, then his price is also wrong. So how much confidence you lay on estimation, including eventualities, you should also cost the risk. Your estimate does not mean purely the item rate, means the BOQ you have written, some item you have written, rate you have taken, multiplied by quantity and amount. It's not limited to that. You should also give some categorization for the various risks, that if something happens, this is the contingent value, lump sum amount you should keep, so that you have a flexibility in operating the contract. If that contingent item is not there in the BOQ, you cannot operate. It will convert into a claim. Claim you cannot settle, because you then have to go for a long procedure. So if you improve upon in the BOQ itself, include those unforeseeables as lump sum items, you have a flexibility in operating that. That is my suggestion. It will make you more comfortable in the contracts. Most of the contracts are under litigation because the contractor finally gave up that he cannot do it. Not because yes.
Sorry for interrupting. We are running short of time now.
Yes.
3 minutes left for
I'm
this.
just concluding. I'm just concluding. I'm just trying to say like this, that in my own project, Magdechu, my award cost was 342 crores. My completion cost is 616 crores. I'm double, 100% variation. So now let us analyze whether my initial estimate was wrong, or of course, this completion cost I am talking about, including the component of the price adjustment. If you exclude, say, 50-60 crore rupees on price adjustment, even then I am 550 crores, 200 crores higher than what I have awarded. So why the things have gone so higher? That is what is required to be analyzed. So my suggestion is that, keeping the tunneling in mind, we have to improve upon the methodologies. We have to improve upon the contracts, flexibility. Very, very, very tough contracts cannot be operated in Indian conditions. Third, the insurance policies, you can find out whether you can get an insurance company for those conditions which you have written for the residual risk. Whether the contractor can realize the money from a company. Just for your guidance, I am telling you. And if you happen to get the answers, please share with us. Myself, Dhawan, Deva, RN Mishra, we are all curious to know whether we can have really that type of system available, because that will help in value addition to future projects. I would like to adopt your system or your specifications in future projects. So this is all what nutshell I would like to tell, and I am again thankful to everybody listening so patiently. I have given a lot of points together. Some of the points you may not like, some of the points you may like, but this is how I am. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Saab. Your points were well taken. After all, you have delivered a project at a very shortest possible time. So now at least, I mean, let us welcome Mr. Anand Mishra Saab. We are almost at the end of the session. So anyway.
Thank you very much, Deva Saab. And I would like to finish everything within 2 or 3 minutes only. A very wide spectrum of this subject has been already covered by Dr. Gopal Dhawan, by Mr. Sumit Jain and A.K. Mishra ji. And I will say that they have covered that case studies, what is being done, what should be done. I just want to give a little different dimension to this issue, or in a different direction. A study was done about the time and cost overrun, basically time overrun, and in which the experts from the hydropower industry were consulted. Everybody was having more than 25 years of experience, and all of them had really worked at site. And their responses were received. They were from public sector as well as private sector. And the responses, I'm just talking about first top 5 responses. What they said, the public sector persons, they were of the opinion that why things are getting delayed. The top reasons are equipment breakdown, deployment of outdated or old equipment machinery, obstruction by locals, delay during construction on account of forest land, forest related issues, and delay due to resettlement and rehabilitation. The contractor said that the top 5 reasons are delay in cost reimbursement, varied work payment, genuine claims of contractors, obstruction by locals, original contract duration is too short, delay in approval of EOT at intermediate and final stage, insufficient data collection and survey before design. What contractor has said, the public sector officers, they had kept these things, except that obstruction by locals to the 19th, 20th or more than 20th rank. And what the public sector people have said, most of them the contractor did not include in their first 20 top priority regions. So there is so much of the difference of perception. And I want to say that these were the people who have worked, and they have answered it honestly. Because these people have I believe that there was no dishonest response in this survey. So if we really want to manage the risk, if we really want to do it, then we must fill this gap. We should bring this gap to close this gap, and only then the success will be possible. For this purpose, I leave the things to our professional colleagues. We don't have much time. We can discuss it later. But this is something which I wanted to share with you. And I want to thank DDAG and all of you for your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mishra-ji.
Sir, you are DDAG.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mishra-ji. That was a very beautiful summation of the problem. We need to bridge the gap between the perceptions. So after this, I think we can come to some questions. Actually, I see only a couple of questions by Mr. A.K. Mehrotra, and they pertain to the drill holes which have been taken for the revised tunnel alignment of the TBM in package 4. So Sumit-ji, if you can tell, he wants that what is the collaboration between the 2 holes, and I will add to it that what are the tests you did, particularly for estimation of squeezing down condition in these holes, and how deep were these holes, deepest?
Sir, the revised boreholes were 600 meters deep, and they were required to be that much deep because of the high overburden we were facing in the revised alignment. And coming to the tests, we have done the dilatometer test, hydrofracture test inside the borehole, and we have also done the intact rock testing on the intact samples. So all those tests we have done, and then we have modeled. Actually, I am not a designer, so We have a consultant with us who has designed this in a model with some assumptions, and he has arrived at the squeezing values, which are at 170 mm at the moment. If there are a change in these values, so we have taken additional precautions to strengthen the ground with grouting, as Mr. Mishra rightly pointed out. We have kept that provision. So and there is also provision to check the squeezing. So with a real-time analysis, we can actually come to know if the squeezing is happening more than what we have thought of, and then we can take the additional precautions like additional overcut or strengthening of ground by grouting measures, and likewise. So I hope this has answered. If not, then
No,
specific.
it has not answered.
Mehtaji,
Actually, my question.
Mehtaji,
Sir.
please keep it very brief. Just
Yes. My question was how the data between two boreholes was extrapolated. Which technique was used for extrapolation? My question was this.
Sir, the two boreholes were not more than 500 meters away from.
500 meters is a very large distance.
Yes, sir. So I would just say that we were relying more on the revised boreholes, and for the gap in the data, we were using the data of the old boreholes. It is not correct. I would not put that we were 100% correct, but this is what has been done.
What I wanted to know, which extrapolation technique you use.
Sumit Jain Saab is telling these holes were not done for extrapolation. There were two boreholes to assess the ground condition that has been done. So let us not.
No. In his presentation, sir, in his presentation, he has told that data between the two boreholes were extrapolated. This is the statement. So I just wanted to know which extrapolation technique.
Okay. I mean, now let us finish it. Sumit Saab, you want to say something?
Sir, I cannot answer your question. I don't have the answer to your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I think with this, Shivani has put up a question, I think on behalf of Hemchand Upreti, but the question was not very clear. And I think because Mr. Upreti wanted to know whether the RBNL can share the contract document. That cannot be shared, I can tell on their behalf. So that is over. I think there are no more questions.
There was one more question was there from my side.
Geophysical was there, but that is not very important. I think we are already 7 minutes overshot the program. So let us, if somebody else wants to say something, just for 1 minute, we are there, and then we will wind up.
I just wanted to know the geophysical technique was used for defining the lithology, the seismic survey, P wave and S wave. They can identify lithology.
Sir, we have done seismic refraction and electrical resistivity test in the areas where overburden was less. And recently, we have also conducted and completed airborne electromagnetic survey for the entire alignment. So it is a continuous data collection.
Because geophysics helps in defining the discontinuities also.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mehta Saab, for very piercing questions. And now I think we come to the end of this program, and I will keep another 1 minute for anybody else to speak something if they like.
सर नमस्कार सर, मेरा एक जो है क्वेश्चन है सर, ये मिश्रा साहब ने जो समस्या किया था, ये जो PSU का था जो टनलिंग के अंदर, सर आप सुन रहे हैं मेरी आवाज?
हाँ सुन रहा हूँ
जी
सब सुन रहे हैं।
नहीं ये सर AK मिश्रा जी के लिए नहीं है सर, ये RN मिश्रा जी के लिए। एक्चुअली मिश्रा साहब ने जो समेशन किया है कि जो PSU के जो लोग थे जिन्होंने पूरा पॉइंट्स को समेशन किया कि दीज वर द मेन रीजन्स, उसमें कहीं पर भी एक भी रीजन उन्होंने ये शो नहीं किया कि कोई हमारे जो है ना जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन में कोई इशू था या नहीं था। दे हैव डिस्क्राइब्ड ऑल अदर रीजन्स, सो दीज रीजन्स आर basically not tenable. If you see the projects, like I can see show you this, you see this Parvati 2 project, you see Tapovan Vishnugad project, you see Vishnugad Pipli Koti project. All projects basically are delayed because of the inadequate investigation.
Let me answer you. I have said top 5 regions. Actually 92 regions were identified. They have put it somewhere, but the priority was below 20. It
But-
was not. It is not so that they said these are not the regions. They have ranked there. What is the priority? The priority given by the PSUs were on the lower side, and the priority given by certain things by the private sector was on higher side, that the PSU people were taking on the lower side. So that is what I am saying. There is a difference in the perception. There is a gap in perception that we need to close. That is what I have said.
I want to add that comparison of Parvati with contemporary TBMs is unfair. Parvati is a 1995 TBM. You cannot compare Ambassador car with latest model of Toyota or something like that. That is one of the very big handicaps in Parvati, you know.
No, actually.
And let me finish, Mr.
Yeah, yes.
The unnecessary emphasis on investigation and linking all the delays with investigations is also not correct, because what you are doing is you are not improving the construction methodology in that case, which is the main reason for success of tunnels. We have seen in many projects. We have seen in Uri, we have seen in Kishanganga, we have seen in Dhauliganga, we have seen in Mangdechu, with a similar type of, there was no extraordinary investigation here. But the projects were handled very, very competently, you know. Mr. A.K. Mishra ji is here, and Mangdechu had a lot of challenges. As he said, the shell sharp was a very weak rock. It was improved, and one of the rare occurrences where you have actually testing before grouting and after grouting. You are actually and being done by an independent organization, third organization. Such type of data is rarely found. So investigations are important, but at the same time, the construction techniques, the handling of contracts plays a vital role in project completion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Imranji. I think we have had a very good session of discussion, and actually this is an endless debate. We can continue for hours on this, and it will still not be concluded. So we rest it at this stage, and I think we have had a very good idea about the risk management coming from different perceptions. Your technical from Dhawan Saab, then Sumit Jain Saab, this risk register, and what all they have done. I hope these risk register findings are helpful in the construction. And Mr. Saab have given quite a lot of advice to everybody. And finally, Anand Mishra Saab, that bridging the gap between the perceptions of the public sector and the contractor. These are the things they come up today. And I would like to end this program here, but out of pure respect to Dhawan Saab, I would like, whether you would like to say, I think he must be having something which as a parting gift he may like to share with us. Dhawan Saab.
I just want to say big thank you to all the panelists and everybody who has contributed. In the end, Imran has really given a good insight into this, that we should not be unfair with our practices of saying that, I mean, not undue advantage to investigations or undue blame at investigations, rather, I would say. But I would say let us have a mix between the two, because there are projects which were investigated very, very nicely, but they are held up because of bad contract management. But there are projects where there are lacunas in the initial investigation itself. So I think we are facing with both the kind of situations. And today's discussion, I am really very happy that we have achieved partially the aim for which this discussion was held today. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you, Deva sir, for very ably moderating the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, our special speaker. Thank you, audience. Thank you, the question raisers. Thank you for everything. And we look forward to seeing you all again next month on second Saturday with some discussion on some contemporary topic. So thank you very much for joining in. So stay tuned. We meet next month. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Namaste.
Thank you.